Welcome to Berkeley Unified School District's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month celebration. Hear Us Roar, celebrating AAPI literary voices in the Year of the Tiger. My name is Joemi Ito Gates. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the ethnic studies teacher on special assignment for Berkeley Unified School District, as well as a proud parent of a soon-to-be first grader in BUSD. Additionally, I am a leadership team member of the advocacy group BUSD AAPIs, and I co-organize this event with two other BUSD AAPI members, Rachel Lee and Janice Tanimura. We are thrilled that you have all joined us this evening. Tonight, we will begin with a presentation by celebrated children's book author Inosanta Nagara. Then we will continue with some fabulous read-alouds by drag queen story hour artist and writer Panda Dulce. And finally, we will end with a special presentation by upper grades author, novelist, TV writer, and BUSD parent, Shanti Sekharin. Before we begin our program, we want to make sure everyone is able to access the closed captions, which are enabled. You can go down to your Zoom toolbar and click on the three dots to enable captions. If you find that you need a presenter to slow down or repeat some key information, please let us know via the Q&A feature in your toolbar. We also invite you to ask our presenters questions via the question and answer feature as well, and we will get to as many of them as we're able to. We also want to acknowledge the fact that making these kinds of community events more accessible to our entire community through visual descriptions, live captioning, and live American Sign Language interpretation is an area of growth. We apologize for not having more access supports and know that we need to do better and commit to working toward these changes in the future. Today, we honor the first people and original stewards of these lands, the Lishan Ohlone people. Our schools are in Huichin on unceded Lishan territory. Ohlone peoples have been on this land for hundreds of years and are the original stewards of Huichin. We honor the Ohlone people and their continued efforts to rematriate the land back to Indigenous peoples. And we invite our BUSD community to take action and get involved. You can learn more by visiting the websites for Sagoyate Land Trust and shellmound.org. Today, we also want to honor the fact that it is the double birthday of two racial justice legends, Yuri Kochiyama and Malcolm X. Through their friendship and individual legacies, Malcolm and Yuri inspired people to come together and to have pride and love for themselves and their communities. Now, more than ever, their legacies of truth-telling and solidarity inspire us to unite against hate and ignorance. And just as Yuri Kochiyama modeled throughout her lifetime, the AAPI community continues to stand in solidarity with the African American community. And now I would like to introduce two of our BUSD AAPI leadership team members, Charlene Chang and Mike Chang, to talk briefly about the history and significance of our advocacy group.
Hi, I'm Charlene. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Joemi. So excited about tonight's event. Mike and I are going to talk a little bit about the BUSD AAPI group, and we're the group that is hosting this event tonight. And I know this is going to be a really fun night and there's so much in store, so I'll make it really quick. Joemi and the other organizers of tonight's event wanted to ask me to briefly describe like how our group got started. And actually, you know, our group got started out of some challenging circumstances. Many of us know that over the pandemic, there was an increase in attacks and hate crimes and unkind acts towards Asian American people just because of the way they look, because certain people thought that Asian Americans were responsible for COVID and the pandemic. And it was just a really challenging time. And last spring, after a series of these, this kind of news and especially the case in Atlanta, we didn't hear much from the district. And there was one small mention in an email by district leaders, but some of us parents decided that we wanted to speak up. We wanted to speak up and let the district leaders know that we expected them to do more. We were disappointed, and we wanted them to step up and recognize and acknowledge the pain that our community was going through, and how that time of those type of attacks were affecting our own community and how it might have made us feel. So I have, the really good news is the district leaders and board members were very responsive, and we essentially, after we had made that clear to them and organized people to sign a letter, 400 people signed that letter. Many of you might be on tonight. They've been meeting with us ever since, and we've been able to really communicate with them both ways, kind of getting them a sense of what our community wants and needs. And it's just a great start. And this organization is just 1 year old, and I feel like we've done so much already together. And one of the things that's important, I think, for what I wanted to let people know is, unfortunately, the rise in sort of this situation with, unkind acts towards Asian Americans in this country is continuing to be on the rise. In fact, it's rapidly increasing as we speak. So an event, I think, like today is a great way for us to remember that there's so much to celebrate in the AAPI culture and community, and that this increased leadership and visibility you will see today of artists, of different people, voicing their stories is so, so important. And speaking of increased leadership and visibility, I wanted to just give a quick shout out that we have in our community. There's going to be a board election this fall, and there are 2 AAPI candidates who will be running. One is Mike Chang, and one is Rachel Lee, who you'll be meeting. And we're lucky to have them, and just to show that representation and to show our young people that AAPI folks run for office and go out there and serve the public and make a difference. So I am just really happy to see that. We apparently haven't had an AAPI board member on our school board for decades and decades. So it's an exciting time. And speaking of an exciting time, it's a time of transition, and our district is going through changes, but it's evolving all the time. And I think BUSD, this particular group, is part of that change, and just really proud of us and looking forward to tonight's event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlene. As Charlene said, and she's reflected, it really is so important for all community stakeholders to have a voice that is both inclusive in decision-making and also inclusive in outcomes. And this group of BUSD API folks really stepped up and engaged with the school district who, after our engagement and advocacy on these important issues about inclusive voices, now we're in the second May Heritage Month event. And I want to reflect, Charlene pointed to that Heritage Month celebrations, as important as they are as opportunities to share food and culture and learn from each other, there are also spaces for authentic representation. And this is a form of stepping up. And we are in a moment of tremendous social and cultural change across the country. And Berkeley is not immune from these changes. But we are pleased here that you are here to join us in promoting an inclusive BUSD community. And we look forward to working with you in solidarity. So thank you. We're having some fun tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlene and Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening for a wonderful artist and author book reading event in celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. My name is Janice Tanimura, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a co-chair of the Asian American Affairs Committee at Berkeley Arts Magnet, where my kids go to school, and I'm a part of the advocacy group BUSD AAPI. And I'm super excited to introduce our first author, Inosanto Nagata. Inosanto's stories focus on complex social issues that enable children and caregivers alike to see the magic that exists in collective resistance. His stories teach us that strength, creativity, and love are all sparked by our common struggles against oppression. Inosanto is an activist, a graphic designer, and the founder of Design Action Collective. Inosanto, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Hello. Hi, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me. So my name is Ino Santonagara. I'm originally from Jakarta, Indonesia. I moved here to go to college and then ended up meeting my life partner and staying. But so now I've been here over 30 years. I live in Oakland. I have a child who is Oakland School District student. He's 11 years old now. And like mentioned, I was a graphic designer and still am, and I do activism. But when my son was born, when he was 2 years old, I wanted to have a book that I wanted to read to him over and over and over and over again about the things that I cared about and that people in my family and my community. I live in a community with 4 other families, and my son is the youngest of 8 to be born into our community. A bunch of them actually went to Berkeley Unified. Some have already graduated, some are still at school. So I live in a community of teachers and activists and organizers, and I wanted to have a book that was about the things that we do. And that's when I wrote A is for Activists. This is the first book that I wrote, and this is the book that probably most people know the most about. But since then, I ended up writing a bunch of other books. I ended up doing Counting on Community. The most recent follow-up on that in the board book genre is Together. But you know, my son is growing. I wrote the book when he was 2, and then by the time he was in 1st grade and 2nd grade, I wanted to have a book that was more of a story. He wanted to have stories from me, not just ABC books. And so that's when I wrote My Night in the Planetarium. Now, this one is the one I'm going to read to everybody tonight. And I wish I could see people out there. Unfortunately, I can't see you all, so I don't know exactly how many of you are out there and what ages you are, and I'd love to see your reactions, but at least we get to do this over Zoom and I can be in everybody's living room. So My Night in the Planetarium, I'll talk a little bit more about this when I read it, but this is about a true story about my life when I was in Indonesia as a kid. And since this is AAPI Heritage Month, I believe this is why we are talking about Indonesia. But I've also written some other books. There's one called The Wedding Portrait, which is about why sometimes we break the rules. To make change almost always requires breaking some rules. And then as my kid got older, I wanted to write a book and tell stories that he could read himself. He's now 11, as I mentioned, but when he was in 3rd grade, I wrote M is for Movement. And this is more of a chapter book. It's a middle grade chapter book, but it has a lot of images as well, because he's a kid who likes to have big pictures in his books. And then the last book that I will mention is called Oh, the Things We're For. And this is a book about not just the things that we're against, but what is the future that we're all fighting for. But today I'm going to read you My Night in the Planetarium. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to talk about some questions. I know some of you have already asked some questions, and I'll do my best. I'm not so good with the chat, but hopefully we can make this interactive. So what I'm going to do first is share screen. And I'm going to share my desktop. And then I am going to do full screen mode with My Night in the Planetarium, so you can see the images, because I draw the pictures on these books too, and it's really important to me that you guys get to actually see it. If I can get a thumbs up, I guess, if this is working. I'm assuming it will be. Let me know if it's not, and please interrupt. But this is My Night in the Planetarium. When I was 7, I got to spend the night in a planetarium. This is a true story. Do you want to hear it? I hope so. Only 3 countries in the world have more people than Indonesia. Do you know what they are? China, India, the United States, and then comes Indonesia. Indonesia is an archipelago, which means it's made up of lots of islands. There's 17,000 islands in Indonesia. There are 300 different ethnic groups, and people speak 750 different languages and dialects. It's a very diverse place. Indonesia is rich in natural resources, fish from the sea, fruit from the trees, and spices. Oh, the spices. Indonesia is where the Spice Islands are. When you learn about Columbus, you will learn that he was looking for the Spice Islands when he got lost and was shipwrecked in Haiti. But that's another story. Let's get back to Indonesia. People all over the world came to Indonesia to buy spices. Some of them, like the Dutch, decided to stay. We Indonesians are really nice, so we let them stay. They stayed for 350 years. Finally, Indonesians decided it was time for the Dutch to go home. They hadn't been very good guests. They stole our spices, they took over our government, and they put people in jail if they complained. So people from all across the Indonesian islands decided to unite and kick them out. We call this the Indonesian Revolution. After the revolution, we all lived happily ever after, the end. No, not really. This is a true story, so things are more complicated than that. Just before I was born, a new ruler came to power. He was a general from the military and was used to everyone following his orders. He ruled Indonesia with an iron fist. Lots of people were afraid of him. He let his family and friends get rich while the rest of the country was poor. And just like the Dutch, his army put people in jail if they complained. My dad, who you would call Datuk in Indonesia, is a poet and a playwright. He and his friends would gather for poetry readings, and he had a theater troupe that put on plays that lots of people would come to watch. Datuk and his theater troupe believed in free speech and didn't think that the general was treating people well. So they decided to do a play about how that was wrong. They put up posters all over town, and they called the play Sit. That's Indonesian for hush or be quiet, or, well, you probably know other ruder ways to tell someone you want them to stop speaking, don't you? The theater troupe would rehearse their play in our garage every day. I would hang out and listen. Because I was 7 and a good listener, I was able to memorize the whole play. When the actors would forget their lines, I would remind them. I think this annoyed them a bit. So they finally said, hey, if you're going to be so good at remembering all those lines, you should be in the play. So my dad made a part for me. I got to be a spy. The play was really popular. Lots of people came to see it because they'd heard that it was a clever play. It was a story about people who were being ruled by an evil king from another land. But the people united and kicked out the king. There were many heroes, but one hero in particular stood out and became their new leader. But then that new leader started acting like the old king, letting his family get rich and putting people in jail who complained. Everyone knew the play was about the general, but since it didn't actually say it was about him, they hoped that they wouldn't get into trouble. Our family traveled across Indonesia with the theater troupe performing the play. Everywhere the play went, more and more people came to see it. At the same time, people across Indonesia were protesting against the general. University students were protesting in the streets, poets were reading protest poems, and folk singers were singing protest songs. Some of them were arrested for saying what they really thought. That's when we heard that the general was really mad. He'd ordered his soldiers to arrest my dad and the other actors. The soldiers were going to come after the play closed and the audience had gone home. So that night, everyone in my dad's theater troupe brought their toothbrushes to the performance. They figured, well, if you're going to go to jail for a long time, you may as well have your toothbrush with you so you can keep your teeth clean. But this is a true story. The performance was in a huge theater complex called PIM. There were indoor stages, outdoor stages, a movie theater, and even a planetarium. During the week, I took Balinese dance lessons in one of the smaller theaters. Since my dad's play was really popular, they were performing it in the biggest outdoor theater. The final performance was a success. But sure enough, after the audience left, the soldiers came to find my dad. And yet, he was nowhere to be found. The theater was empty. My dad and all the actors had snuck out with the audience. My mom and I had said goodbye to him as he got into a bajai. Now that orange thing there, that's a bajai. It's like a little taxi cab that has 3 wheels, one wheel in the front and 2 in the back. And the driver, you can see the driver in the front, and then my dad would get in the back, and it's got seats for 2 people, but you can usually fit 6 or 7 if you want. And they have these all over, or they did have them all over Jakarta when I was a kid. So my mom and I had said goodbye to him as he got into a bajai in the alley behind the theater, when then he headed out of town to lay low for a while. The problem was we couldn't go home either because we'd heard that the soldiers were waiting at our house. That's when my mom said, let's go to the planetarium. So my mom and I went to the planetarium and watched the show. Then we watched it again and again. It was dark and beautiful under the stars, and we were safe. I fell asleep on my mother's lap. And that is how I got to spend the night in the planetarium. The end. So a lot of kids have questions usually afterwards. So I wrote a little thing called an epilogue. It sort of says what happens after that story. I wanted to tell the story about the night, how I got to the night in the planetarium. And it's really about everything else, about colonialism and art and resistance in Indonesia. But a lot of kids, you'll have these questions about sort of then what happened. So I'm going to read you this real quick. That's me in one of the other plays that I did later on, where I got to be a frog. So I hope you enjoyed my story. I know some of it might have seemed a bit scary for a kid, but honestly, it wasn't scary for me at the time. I knew that my family would take good care of me. Datuk stayed away for a while, but then came back and did many other plays. I got to be in some of those plays too. Everyone thought I was going to grow up and be an actor, but I decided I wanted to study biology. And now I'm an activist and a graphic artist. It's okay to change your mind about what you want to be when you grow up. Meanwhile, my dad continued to do new things too. He did cutting-edge solo plays. Those are plays where he was the only actor in them. He got to read his poetry on national TV. He ran for parliament and is now a famous movie star. He's won many awards, including Indonesia's equivalent to an Oscar. See, the photo on top is him when he was in one of his solo plays wearing a mask. That's not what he really looks like. And then on the bottom, the guy with the green headdress, that's my dad in one of the movies that he won a bunch of awards for. The general ended up ruling Indonesia for over 30 years. He was finally forced to step down in 1998 after massive demonstrations across the country led by students. After that, sometime after that, the general died. The end. Oh, and this is a picture of me doing my Balinese dancing. I will stop my screen share now.
Thank you so much, Inosanto, for that magical story. And now we would like to open it up for Q&A. So you can use the Q&A feature in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. And we already have a couple questions submitted by Mako and Rani. And the question is, what happened to your dad and the general? Did the government stop looking for him?
That's a good question. So my dad, he went to another town for about 2 weeks, and maybe 3 weeks. I don't remember. I was pretty young at it, but basically he went into hiding for a little while. And then the way things were working back then, I know some other kids had some questions about, well, why did they stop looking for him? Well, it's a good question, because basically when things are hot, when he was saying things and people it was causing a lot of trouble, that's when they wanted to capture him. But then when things cooled down and other people had been doing other things, they kind of got their attention onto other things. So some of what happens with these, when you're fighting for social change is sometimes it's just a matter of waiting it out. Sometimes you do what you need to do at the time, but then conditions change, other things change, and you have other opportunities to do other things. And so that's kind of what happened with him, is that he started out, he was doing these plays, and then he was able to basically once things cooled down, he was able to come back and do other things. And they had an eye on him. He had to be more careful for a while there, but at that point he was okay. The general himself, he continued to rule. This all happened when I was 7, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s that he actually stepped down. So he ended up later on, many years later, dying. But yeah, somewhat disgraced.
Oops. Okay, that leads into another question that was submitted by an elementary school student, is that why didn't the people kick out the general earlier? Why did it take so long?
Well, sometimes social change takes a while, right? It's one of the things that we all learn as activists, is that you don't know when the right time is going to be able to make the big change. Change happens often in very big shifts. It'll happen often all at once, but we don't know when that all at once time is going to be. And when everybody is still afraid, I mean, part of the reason is the general was very brutal. He would put people in jail very easily, and people would disappear, and so people were afraid. So it was very hard to say, I'm going to be the first person to stand up, and many people did. There were all kinds of ways that people resisted against the dictatorship, through art, through creativity, through actual protests, sometimes through clever ways of saying things that you're allowed to say, but were actually criticisms of the government. But they had to be very careful, because if at any moment first person just stands up, they just end up disappearing, and then you feel like you don't get anywhere. So what happened was, they had to, a lot of activists over a lot of time tried over the years, and there were movements that would rise up, but then some of the leaders would get taken, and then it would be hard, they'd get suppressed again, and then they'd rise up again. So there are many waves, until finally in 1998 was the wave that succeeded. So I think the message there for me, when I think about, especially in the days that we live right now, there's so many things that feel so overwhelming. There's so many bad things happening. We have leadership that, can be just like the dictator that I grew up under here in America now. But we can trust that if we keep trying, if we keep pushing, if we keep doing our best to use all the different tools that we have, and that's, I think, a big part of it for me, is like, I'm not a person who loves standing on a podium and leading in the way that, you read a lot about leaders from Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, and people who were really good at standing on a podium. But there's also a lot of more quiet leaders, and a lot of ways that people can contribute to social change movements, using the skills that they have and the tools that they feel most comfortable with.
Absolutely. Okay, we have 3 more questions. I hope we can get to them all. So Kaylee asks, who was the general replaced with?
The general was replaced at first with his vice president. His name was B.J. Habibie, and then they actually had a series of changes and elections, and now in Indonesia we do have elected. There's been quite a few presidents since then. Megawati Soekarno Putri was one of the first presidents, and then Gus Dur. So there were a number of people who represented different parts of Indonesia that ended up becoming part of the leadership.
Okay, and
it's not perfect, but it's way better than 32 years of the same guy.
Some progress.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a question. What are things you most miss about Indonesia?
My friends, the food, my family. That food is the thing that brings me back the most. I do go back. I was, before pandemic, I was able to go back at least once or twice a year, and so I get to rejuvenate. But and now my kid knows something about Indonesia, which is really nice. But the food, you can't do it here just as the way you can it tastes in Indonesia.
Nice. That resonates with me. Okay, so Sheridan has a question. Our family would love to learn more about Indonesia. Do you have other children's books about Indonesia and other kids' books you would recommend?
That's a good question. You know, it's interesting. Indonesia is the fourth largest country in the world. It's the largest Muslim country in the world. It's, you know, and yet, because of the history and relationship to the West, there's not a huge Indonesian community. There's some big places where there are quite a few Indonesians, but it's not the same as some of the other AAPI communities in the United States. So there's actually very little, especially in English, in terms of books. And so I don't want to just recommend my own books. MS for Movement is one of them, and that will tell you a bit more about Indonesia. But as far as kids' books, I don't actually know of any other children's books that outside. There's a couple that are about language and learning words in Indonesian, but I don't know of any in the United States or that are in English.
Okay, we're kind of at time. I'd like to ask one question from Gil. Why was the planetarium open all night long? Did they keep it open just for you?
See, these kids are way too smart these days. That's a really good question, because if you think about it, you know, any other planetarium would close, and so how would they get to actually spend the whole night? So the reality is I probably didn't spend the whole night in the planetarium. I fell asleep on my mother's lap, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in the morning. So I believe that she stayed in the planetarium until the planetarium closed, and then carried me out and took me to, we went and stayed at a friend's house. We didn't go home that night. But yes, I did not actually spend the whole night in the planetarium.
That's like the magical sort of imagination of your childhood, kind of.
No, but it's cool. Like all the questions there, like are you know, like those are the loose ends, right, on these stories, and so you've got some serious.
Okay, I'll take one more question. Isa and Bowden would like to know, what was the general's name?
His name was Suharto. In Indonesia, it's very common for people to have just one name. My name is Inosanto Nagara. I have two names, but my father's name is just Ikra Nagara. It's one name, and Suharto was the name of the general. The president before him, his name was Sukarno, just one name.
Okay, so unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much, Inosanto, for
thank you so much for having me.
Us. And if anyone is interested in meeting Inosanto in person, he will be doing an in-person book reading at East Wind Books of Berkeley on June 22nd at 4 p.m.
Along with Gamelan Sakarjaya, who is doing gamelan music. So it'll be a serious event.
Very nice. So now I'm going to turn it over to Joemi to introduce our next reader.
Thank you so much, Inosanto. That was amazing. And we are big fans of you and your books. So now it's my honor to introduce Panda Dulce to read some AAPI stories this evening. Panda is a San Francisco born and raised bi-gender Chinese American writer, social worker, and drag queen. She's one of the founding queens of Radar Productions' National Drag Queen Story Hour Youth Literary Program. Panda is also a former kindergarten teacher and loves to share books and the art of drag with young people. And for those who don't know, bi-gender means someone who identifies with two genders, being both a man and a woman. Thank you so much for being here with us, Panda Dulce. It's a joy to be able to celebrate AAPI month with you.
Hello, hello. Joemi, thank you so much for that introduction. I am touched. Hi, everyone. I must say, Inosanto, that was an incredible story. And I'm glad you stayed awake for most of it so you could write it down and we could have the treat of hearing it. I learned a lot. Happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, everyone. Again, I'm Panda Dulce, and I'm zooming in from San Francisco. I'm here to read you 3 books today. I'm really excited about this one. It's called Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho. Joanna Ho is a Taiwanese and Chinese American author from Minneapolis. Some people have eyes like sapphire lagoons, with lashes like lace trim on ball gowns, sweeping their cheeks as they twirl. Big eyes, long lashes. Not me. I have eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea. My eyes are just like mama's. Mama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea crinkle into crescent moons when she comes home from work. She scoops me in her arms, eyes sparkling like starlight, and tickles me until we laugh ourselves onto the floor. Look at all those vegetables. Good for them, huh? When Mama tucks me in at night, her eyes tell me I am a miracle. In those moments when she's all mine, flecks of dancing gold tell me I'm hers too. What a cozy situation. My mama is my sun and sky, and her eyes are just like Ama's. That's Ama. Ama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea don't work like they used to. But she sees all the way into my heart and can even read my mind. Wow. That's Guan Yin. We'll learn more about her later. Like right now. I see Guan Yin with the Monkey King sitting on a lotus, serene. Baubles of lychee on trees and mountains that reach for the sea. So Guan Yin is the Chinese goddess of compassion, which means being nice and treating other people the way you'd like to be treated. And that's the Monkey King. He's supposed to be really strong. They say that he can hold mountains on his shoulders even when running. Pretty impressive, huh? My Ama never ages, and her eyes are just like Mei's. Mei's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea blink against the window until I come home from school. They disappear beneath her two-toothed smile when I walk in the door. She toddles after me, gazing up at me like I am her best present. I hope she looks at me like that forever, because when she looks at me in that Mei way, I feel like I can fly. What a good older sibling. Mei's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea are just like mine. My eyes also crinkle into crescent moons and sparkle like the stars. Gold flecks dance and twirl while stories whirl in their oolong pools, carrying tales of the past and hope for the future. My eyes find mountains that rise ahead and look up when others shut down. My lashes curve like the swords of warriors, and through them I see kingdoms in the clouds. What animal is that? That's a phoenix. My eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea are a revolution. You are too. The end. So that is book 1. I love that book because they all have eyes just like mine. They're like almonds, delicious, but don't eat them, please. The next book I have is called Amira's Picture Day. This is written by Reem Faruqi, who is a Pakistani author who moved to Atlanta, Georgia when she was a teenager. This is her story. Amira peered through the window, but saw only the black, unblinking sky. Do you see the moon? Whispered Mom. Ziad scanned the sky and shouted, I think I see it. I see it too, Amira said. Do you see the moon? Mom drew them in for a hug. That means it's Eid tomorrow. Amira felt warm and tingly inside. She couldn't keep still, even when she tried. She rushed to bring her mom the Mendi cone. In a few minutes, her hands were decorated with wet, green swirls and designs. Her mom even doodled her favorite animal, a dolphin, and a mermaid on the other hand. Amira held her hands out carefully to make sure they dried. She hoped that the next morning, her Mendi designs would be a deep chocolate brown. Wow. Tomorrow we're gonna skip school, yelled Ziad. Amira cheered. Okay, you two, let's use your energy to make some goodie bags, said Mom. Amira joined her little brother in counting lollipops for the children at the masjid. A masjid is a mosque. It is a place of worship. A colorful flyer on the fridge caught her eye. Tomorrow was picture day. Amira's cheeks felt hot. Her insides felt cold. She had already chosen her pink striped dress. Miss Bailey had told them that tomorrow they would be taking a group photo of the entire 2B class. Mom, tomorrow is picture day at school, wailed Amira. Don't worry, Amira. We'll take plenty of pictures of you at the masjid in your new Eid clothes, said her mom, ironing Amira's shalwar kameez. Amira knew it wouldn't be the same. She loved Eid and the party at the masjid, but she didn't want to be left out of her class picture. How would her classmates remember her if she wasn't there? Amira brushed her thoughts away as she tried to fall asleep that night. The next morning, Mom woke her. Eid Mubarak, Amira, which means have a blessed Eid. Amira traced the Mendi on her hands dreamily. Her mermaid and dolphin were a deep chocolate brown now. Amira smiled as she got out of bed, thinking of all the Eid treats she would get today. Her new Eid shalwar kameez hung nearby. Suddenly, she spotted the pink striped picture day dress. The more Amira thought of picture day, the longer she took to get dressed. What do you think's going on? I think she's trying to decide between the two, but they're both beautiful. When Amira was finally ready, she looked in the mirror. Tiny mirrors on her blue shalwar kameez shone happily in the sunlight. As she was leaving the room, Amira took one last look longingly at her pink striped dress. Mom, are you sure it's Eid today, not tomorrow? Can I still go to school for picture day? Miss Bailey will miss me, pleaded Amira. Amira, we saw the moon. It's Eid today. Now let's go, answered Baba. Baba is another way of saying dad. Seeing the masjid, Amira's sadness floated away. Her mouth popped open. She could hardly recognize it. These people look fun, huh? Streamers with stars hung on the wall and colorful balloons decorated the ceiling. Amira swung her basket of goodie bags proudly. She could hardly focus on the melodious Eid prayer. She smelled the fresh scent of just baked cookies. Yum. She smiled to herself as she prayed. Right after the Eid prayer, she rushed to her basket and handed out the goodie bags to her friends at the masjid. Lots of mom's friends gave Amira hugs. She made sure to hug them back and wish them Eid Mubarak when she remembered. It was only when her aunt Farah Kala told Amira to smile big for a photo that she remembered picture day. Amira smiled small. After the exciting Eid celebration at the masjid, Amira looked around. A few balloons floated down to the floor. She felt like one of those balloons. If only she had not missed picture day. Oh, I wish she could have both. On the way home, Amira closed her eyes tightly to hold back tears. Suddenly, Amira had an idea. Holding her breath, she began to count her leftover goodie bags quickly. There were just enough for her class. Ooh, she's getting some ideas. What do you think's gonna happen? Mom, Baba, can we stop by my class and deliver the extra goodie bags to them? Her parents' faces softened while they exchanged a look. Sure, Amira, answered her mom. Do you think I might make it for picture day? She asked. I'm not sure, Mom explained. According to the flyer, 2B's photos are in the afternoon, so let's hope you're on time. As Baba and Ziad waited in the car, Amira looked down at her shalwar kameez. She wasn't wearing her pink striped dress for picture day, but she was here at school. Feeling a little funny, she walked stiffly inside. Each leg felt like a wobbly towel of blocks. She's a little nervous. In classroom 2B, the class was busy getting in line. Had Amira missed picture day? Just in time, Amira, said Miss Bailey. I love your outfit. Amira's mom explained to Miss Bailey that today was Eid and that the family had been to the masjid to celebrate this special day for Muslims. As her teacher and mom chatted, Amira handed the basket of goodie bags shyly to her teacher. I like your hands, said Raphael. Your clothes are so colorful, added Wei. You look like a princess, gasped Reagan. That's what my name means, giggled Amira as she skipped into the line. What a perfect end to Eid. As the class stood together in the gym, the photographer told them to smile. Amira did not need to be told to smile. She was already smiling. The end. Oh, I love that story. So many outfits. Love me an outfit. So this is our last story. It is a very special one to me because I am part Hawaiian. It's called Ho'onani Hula Warrior by Heather Gale and Mika Song. Heather Gale is from New Zealand, and Mika Song is from Manila in the Philippines and Honolulu in Hawaii. Ho'onani Kamai did not see herself as a wahine, girl, or think she was a kane, boy. She preferred just Ho'onani. She is who she is, her mother said. She does what she wants, her father said. But her sister, Kana, wished Ho'onani did not sing songs so loud or play ukulele faster and better than every kane at school. One morning, Ho'onani's teacher, Kumuhina, made an announcement. This year, they would bring a Hawaiian custom back to the community. Our high school Kane will perform a traditional hula chant, she said. Closing her eyes, Ho'onani could almost smell smoke from the driftwood fire. Hear feet stomp, stomp, stomping, see fingers tap, tap, tapping, and palms pitter, pat, patting. She sighed. If only she were Kane and old enough for high school. Then Ho'onani heard auditions, auditions. More ideas. Ho'onani could not wait to tell her family. There'll be 3 tests, she said, and Kumuhina thinks I should try out. Her mother, father, and brothers were not surprised. Kana rolled her eyes. Really? Ho'onani wanted to say she could not believe it either, but before she could speak, her sister changed the subject. Kana is not happy about this. The next day, Ho'onani jogged to the gym. She peered inside. Strolling down the line, Kumuhina inspected each Kane's stance. On her command, their arms rose, bending at the elbows. When Kumuhina pushed down hard to measure warrior strength, Ho'onani's breath quickened. She could be with them. Her mind made up, she strode inside. One by one, their faces changed. A wahine! A wahine? Not a wahine! Last in line, Ho'onani lifted her arms. As Kumuhina pushed down, she held her place. Strong, sure, and steady. Like Inosanto said, sometimes revolution means breaking the rules. Ho'onani could not stop grinning when she told her family she passed. Kana frowned. How embarrassing! Her words made Ho'onani's chin tremble. She wanted to ask Kana if they could ride bikes again, like they used to, but before she could speak, her sister had turned away. I wish Kana were more supportive. Memorizing the sway and song of story took patience and practice. Ho'onani did not stop until Hawaii's history was a part of her, in dreams by night and thoughts by day. Hands dragging across her face, arms reaching for the sky. As Ho'onani called the sun, the moon, the stars, she held her place, strong, sure, and steady. Finally, it was time to choose a leader. Ho'onani's stomach twisted in nervous knots. One Kane, another, and then another stepped forward. Ho'onani studied them. Who was nervous or worried? Who stood tall? Who slouched? Who stayed focused? And who squirmed? Then her turn. Faces swam in front of Ho'onani as she called for attention. Oh, I ho. She paused. Would they follow her? No time to think. Words pushed against her lips and the chant tumbled out. Ai kamumokeke, sweeping her warriors into a tidal wave of voices until Ho'onani called the end. Hayala, hayala, eoe. Silence hung in the air. When Ho'onani saw complete awe and true acceptance, she held her place, strong, sure, and steady. She was their leader. Later, Kumuhina beckoned her over. Her teacher spoke with respect and honesty. She said, some might not appreciate a wahine leading their sons up on stage. They might create a fuss. Ho'onani knew she could not quit now. She had earned this position. She thought of her sister and looked up at Kumuhina. If someone wants to leave, she said, that's their problem. That evening, Ho'onani couldn't wait to tell her family she had been chosen as leader of the Kane hula troupe. Her parents and brothers were proud, but Kana wasn't. Why do you always have to reject wahine things? Kana said. Just because I feel more Kane doesn't mean I'm not wahine. I'm in the middle. Why can't you let me be me? Before Kana could speak, Ho'onani left the table. At last, the day of the show arrived. People lined up, tickets in hand. Chatter overflowed the hall. Lights dimmed. Ho'onani wanted to feel strong, sure, and steady, but she was nervous. What if she wasn't Kane enough? If people protested, what would she do? From behind the curtain, a voice boomed. The next day, the island shook violently. Tutu Pele erupted from the depths. Oli! Ho'onani shouted back on cue. Ready or not, it was time. And to the beat of drums, the thud of heels, the clack of sticks, she toe heel stomped across the stage. Ho'onani faced the crowd. Her skin prickled. She felt their curiosities stir the darkness, but she held her place, strong, sure, and steady. Ai kamumu keike, her voice thundered. The crowd gasped with appreciation and roared with approval. One person stood. Ho'onani caught her breath. Kana? Ho'onani had found her place, not as a wahine, not as a Kane, but as a hula warrior. The end.
Yay. Thank you so much for reading those amazing stories.
Thanks so
And
much for having me.
you look just like a gorgeous, stunning lychee. So just have to compliment your beautiful outfit and makeup.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. And I welcome our audience members to please use the Q&A. We have a few minutes for some questions, and you already have fan mail. So already I'm going to read this little message from Milani, who said, Panda Dulce, you are beautiful, powerful, and amazing. The glitter, the hair flip, the storytelling is life. Thank you for sharing your vibrant spirit.
Of course, thanks for having me, and right back at you.
And yeah, I ditto all of that. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, actually. They kind of all go together.
Absolutely.
So it's, what does drag mean to you? How did you get into drag? And what do you love most about drag?
Oh, those are great questions. Well, I first got into drag in high school. For Halloween, I wanted to be a pink Barbie with real tall blonde hair, and I did it. And when I looked in the mirror, I said, I really like what I see. And so I just kept doing it. And here I am years later. But in terms of what drag means to me, I think growing up, I was very feminine. I love to play with girls. I love to play with makeup. I love to play Foursquare when I should have been playing kickball, which was the boys' sport. And so everyone told me I couldn't be that. And so what I did is I put all of my feminine things into a box so nobody could see it. I hid it from everyone. To me, drag is opening that box for the world to see. It is me letting my little inner child play and be as feminine as she wants and being whatever she wants. And in terms of what drag means to me, this all kind of flows, I guess. In terms of what drag means to me and what it is to me. It is, has anyone ever told you you can be whatever you want when you grow up?
Yep.
You can, in terms of your job, in terms of what you want to do. That's what drag is to me. So if I want to be an empress, I can just wear it. If I want to be a robot, I can do that. If I want to be a mermaid, I can do that. All I have to do is imagine it and believe it. And drag lets me become it. And so drag is very important to me. And whether you do drag or not, I hope you have the confidence to be what you want to be.
Wow, your answer's making me teary-eyed. It's
Oh,
so beautiful.
stop.
Oh my gosh, sounds like drag is life, it's celebration, it's healing, it's joy.
Yeah.
It's so
All of you.
beautiful. So I have time for one more question. This is a very important question. It's a serious question.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, get ready. Would you rather eat ice cream every day or pizza every day, and why?
Oh, you really just put me on the spot. This is a tough one.
It's a heavy hitter.
My answer is yes. No. So usually when I eat pizza, I'm already doing the dairy thing, so I'll eat ice cream as well, and they're just such a good pair.
Salty and okay, so the sweet and the savory.
Absolutely. But if I had to give you an answer, it would be fruits and vegetables. I would only eat fruits and vegetables, and parents, you can Venmo me for that answer later.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. That was the correct answer. We appreciate you. And just thank you so much for being here. This was just a delight, and you're amazing. Thank you for celebrating with us, and just happy AAPI month.
Happy AAPI month. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been magical. And on Yuri and Malcolm's birthday, no less. Happy Year of the Tiger.
Yes, happy Year of the Tiger, and thank you again. All right. I'm going to now invite Rachie to introduce our next presenter.
Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. My name is, that was great. I'm just still wowed, so wowed by our presenters. My name is Rachie Lee. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a proud mom of two beautiful kids, a 5th and 3rd grader at Rosa Parks. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Shanti Sekaran. She's also a fellow BUSD mom to an 8th grader and 3rd grader. Let me tell you a little bit about Shanti. Shanti is Indian American. She was born in Sacramento. Her parents came to the United States from India in the 1960s. And even though Shanti spent, most of her life writing for grown-ups, everything changed when she became a mother herself. And I would think that a lot of us in the audience here who are moms or are caregivers definitely understand that transformation. So it was then that she rediscovered the beauty and the clarity of purpose in children's books, and thus really began her journey of writing for children and young adults. Now, some fun things about Shanti. Her favorite food is bibimbap, which is a Korean rice bowl that I think many of us love also. Her favorite family activity is Monopoly. And her own favorite childhood game is Boggle, which is a word search game. And two people she would love to play with, if she had the chance today, would be her two grandmothers, both of whom she didn't get to meet. Tonight, Shanti will read an excerpt from her most recent book called The Samosa Rebellion. It is written for, about 8 to 13-year-olds, but it's a book that adults can get into also. I'm reading it with my kids, and we can't put it down. Shanti, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. Take it away.
Great. Hi, can everyone see me and hear me? It's great to be here. I can't see our audience, but I know you're out there. So thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Shanti, and I'm a writer. I wrote this book, The Samosa Rebellion, and it came out, can you see it? There it is. It came out, my background's being tricky. It came out in 2021 in the fall, and it's about a boy named Muki. And I'm going to read a bit to you for a few minutes about Muki and his grandmother. So at the very beginning of this book, his grandmother, whom he calls Pati, comes to his hometown. He lives in a country called Mariposa in a little neighborhood called Ocean View. And Pati moves in with him into his house that once was just populated by him and his parents. And now there are 4 people in that little house. What else can I tell you? Pati is a Tamil word. It means grandmother. So that's why he calls her that. And yeah, here we go. Snap. No. Snap, snap. Snap. Quit it. I swat at the air and miss. I crack one eye open, and there she is, the old owl, her gigantic glasses level with my face, her black eyes magnified behind them. Pati. Again, she snaps her fingers in my ear. Wakey, wakey, lazy bones, rise and shine, my boy. I groan and dig my face into my pillow. It's 5:45 a.m. I know this without looking. I know the sun outside my window will be as sleepy as I am. The sky barely light, the sorriest excuse for morning, and Pati's favorite time of day. Want a one-word description of what it's like to share a bedroom with your grandmother? Weird, super weird, weirdest. Now, just like every morning, she spreads 2 yoga mats on the floor between our beds. I sit up, rub the sleep from my eyes. I thought old people were supposed to be tired. Giddy up, sleepy chops, she says, patting the mat next to hers. Time is passing. Time would pass much better if I could close my eyes and go back to sleep. But I tried that yesterday and she splashed water on my face. So I roll off my mattress and land on the floor. I lie still, eyes closed, until she says, Muki, begin please. Warrior pose. Corpse pose, I answer, my favorite. She gets up, goes to the bathroom, and I hear the tap running. She comes back ready to throw water on me, but now I'm up, eyes open, legs lunging, arms shooting straight from my shoulders, solid as a warrior. As the morning meanders through my bones, Pati calls out the poses and springs right into them. Her usual wobble is gone, her limbs speedy and precise. Boat pose, child pose, cobra pose. I follow clumsily. Straight legs, Somberi. Are you a cobra or a kitty cat? Somberi means lazy, and I'd be offended if it wasn't such a fun word to say. I have to admit, when my parents told me that Pati was coming to stay with us, to live with us, my first thought was no. No, 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 no. And have I changed my mind since then? No. Finally, she pats the mat next to hers. Bridge pose, she says. Bridge pose. A week ago, when Pati first got here, bridge pose was impossible. Now I lie on my back and plant my palms above my head. With one light push, I thrust my tummy to the ceiling and my body rises into an arch like an old-fashioned railway bridge. When I first tried it, I could barely get my butt off the floor. Little by little, though, I've worked my way higher. Every day, I get a little stronger. I'm kind of proud of myself, actually. Don't tell Pati that. Today, my bridge rises tall and strong over a roaring river. I can almost hear it. The watery gurgle, the wheezing wind. Behind me, a mountain. Above me, the sky. I solidify. I become the bridge. I am so focused, so completely the bridge that I don't notice Pati creep up. Ha ha, she jabs me in the ribs and tickles me and I crash to the ground. Pati, I holler, I grab at her legs, but she leaps away. I got you good, Somberry. She pulls me to my feet, cackling, and wraps her arms around my shoulder. And now you're awake. She laughs, giving me a squeeze. Suddenly, she goes silent. Her arms turn rigid. What's wrong? She just stares out the window. At the end of her gaze, I find something I've never seen before. It's small and black, with wings that flutter so fast, I almost can't see them. It isn't a hummingbird, though. It isn't alive. Between its wings, it doesn't have a head or a body, but what looks like, is it? A camera lens. Next to the lens shines a steady red light. The winged camera hovers for a second, then drops and dodges. Zigs and zags. Its lens spins one way then the other, like it's trying to focus. What is it? I ask. I don't know, Pati whispers. She lifts a hand, touches the window pane. It sees us. It's looking at me. Pati yanks open the window. Shoo, pura, she hisses. She leans out and smacks at the flying camera, which zips out of reach, its red light flashing. Leave us alone. The camera hovers for a second longer, then buzzes off into the brightening sky. We watch it shrink away. What was that? She puts a hand on my shoulder. Nothing to worry about, she says, her fingers trembling. Nothing at all.
Thank you so much, Shanti. The suspense, even though I read that chapter, I'm like, oh, it's one of these chapters that really kind of sets up the rest of the story. But let's just back up a little bit. You mentioned a little bit about Muki's heritage. Tell us a little bit more. What is his heritage for those who are not aware? And why did you choose it?
So Muki is, he was born in Mariposa, in this country that he lives in, but his family is from South India. So they're Tamil, which means they speak the language Tamil, and they're from the state of Tamil Nadu, which is kind of it's in the south of India, kind of on the southeast coast of India. And that's where half of my family is from. My dad is from Tamil Nadu, and my mom is from Kerala, which is a state right next to it. And they speak Tamil to each other. I grew up in my house learning Tamil, hearing it. I don't speak it all that well, but I can understand it. So that's Muki's heritage is basically my heritage. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was really important that I make him Tamil. For one thing, growing up in the US in like the 80s and 90s, I didn't see a lot of representations of Indians to begin with, or South Asians at all, or even Asians as a group. There were not many representations in the media of Asians. And there were certainly not any representations of Tamil people, even though we're a huge population in South Asia. And so for me, it was really important to represent what I knew, like to represent my own heritage, and to show the diversity of South Asians, to show that we're not a monolith. Indians are not just people who speak Hindi and live in New Delhi or Mumbai. There's a whole vast country. There's 30 plus major languages. There's 1 billion people. There's a lot of diversity over there. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was important to show that. And also we're thinking about activism today, just in reference to Inosanto's wonderful picture book. Activism, it can be going on marches, it can be sort of shouting about what you believe in, but activism can also take the form of telling your own story. giving voice and giving light to your own experience. That's also a form of activism. You're saying, I'm here, and I want you to listen to me, basically.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's transition a bit. In the chapter that you read, in this scene, Pati, so Muki's grandma, begins her day with yoga, which I personally love. And I love all those poses, and I recognize all of those poses. But if you can tell us, briefly, kind of what is yoga? Why did you pick that as something that she would do? And yeah, why did you include it?
So yoga is, for those who are not familiar with it, it's an ancient practice from the region of India, South Asia, India, around there. And as far as we know, it started in 2700 BC. So that's almost 5,000 years ago. It's really old. It's been around forever. And it's basically a practice that is both for the body and for the mind. It tries to bring both the body and mind together. So you have physical stuff. It's like physical exercise to make you stronger and more flexible. But it's also about making your mind calmer and, in a way, making your mind more flexible. It's a way to sort of tune into what your body feels like, to let your mind be quiet, to not be like pushing yourself, and to just appreciate the quiet and the presence of you in your own mind. That's kind of the general philosophy behind yoga. And I wanted to have yoga in here because my own grandfather, who came to the US probably in his 70s, he was pretty old when he came to the US. He was a yoga teacher. My dad became a yoga teacher as a hobby. And yoga has always been a big thing in our family. I was just like Mookie. I was woken up at like 5:45 in the morning when I was younger to get up and do yoga. And I pretty much hated it, but I'm glad now, I guess, that I had to do that. Although I did really love my sleep. So that's why I decided to put it in here, but also for the story, it actually becomes important for the story. When Mookie is in some of his scariest, most intense, suspenseful moments, it's yoga that actually helps him out of some of his binds.
I love that. It's a form of meditation and a walk inward. That's really beautiful. We do have a question in the Q&A, but I kind of want to key it up. And so I'm going to ask you one question, and then we'll go to the one that's in the Q&A. Okay. And so, there's flying things in the book, right? Because I don't want to totally give it away, because I really encourage everybody to read it if you haven't, because it's like a nail biter. So I don't want to totally give it away, but we did see from the kind of the end of this chapter, there's something flying. It's a camera. There's a little red dot, and grandma is like, don't worry about it, right? But her hands are shaking. Let's we'll keep that thought there. There are other flying things, flying species in your book that really kind of takes a very prominent theme. And for those who, it's in Shanti's background, but there are butterflies, and then there are also moths in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose those?
Yeah, the butterflies and moths, they play a few different roles in this book. When I was starting to write it, I knew that I wanted to talk about immigration and how immigrants were treated in this country. But I was in Mariposa. I was also very aware that I was writing a book for young readers, and I wasn't going to write it in the same way that I was going to write for adults. And I was going to tackle some pretty heavy issues. But I wanted to do that in as I guess as fun a way as possible, as imaginative a way as possible. And talking about immigration just felt too heavy-handed. It felt like a news report, and I wanted to sound like a storybook. So instead of talking about immigrants and non-immigrants, I talked about butterflies and moths. So in Mariposa, the president implements this system where people who have lived in Mariposa for more than 3 generations are called butterflies. They're the long-time Mariposans. People like Muki, whose families have come to the country more recently, are called moths. And so when, and this kind of rolls out throughout the book, things become more and more complicated and dangerous for the moths, for the people who are more recently arrived to Mariposa. So that basically as the plot evolves, as things get a little scarier, a little more complicated, we continue to use butterflies and moths to talk about what's happening. Another thing that is happening with butterflies is that Muki, being in 7th grade, has to do a big 7th grade project, and he decides to do it on butterflies. So as we go through the book, we also learn about butterflies as Muki learns about them, which was a fun thing to me.
For you to research, I bet, right?
Yeah, I learned a lot about butterflies, and that was great. And then finally, I think this whole thing, the whole like butterfly moth thing, was inspired by a piece of art that I saw by an artist named Fabiana Rodriguez. She has a poster that she made with a picture of a butterfly, and it says, "Migration is beautiful." And I loved the butterfly as actually a symbol of migration. Butterflies are the Earth's greatest migrators. They migrate thousands and thousands of miles over several generations to get where they need to go within their birth cycles. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. So let's go to the questions. So you may have touched on this already, but let us know if you want to elaborate a little bit more. What inspired you to write the book? And you talk about it from the perspective of, I guess, the story, which, you were just talking about, or like even like shifting to children's book. Like what inspired you to write this particular book?
Yeah, I wanted to, I wanted to try it out. I was kind of done with an adult novel. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next in the world of adult novels. And I thought, let me try this fun exercise where I try to write a children's book and see if I enjoy it. I decided to give myself 3 months to try it out, to see how it felt. And it turns out that I really, really loved it. It was actually really fun to write this book. Also, thinking about the kinds of books that I had when I was a kid. I mean, I loved reading. I had many, many wonderful books to choose from, but I never had a book about an Indian character. And I never had a book about an Indian character whose family resembled mine. So it was really important to me to contribute to that growing world of diverse literature. And we're so lucky now. We have so much wonderful, diverse literature. Yeah.
So lucky. It's like a different world, the amount that we have today compared to when we grew up. And so if Mariposa was a real place, where would it be?
Let's see. I figured this out. Let's see if I can remember. If Mariposa was a real place, it would be an island. And it's an island kind of in the shape of a butterfly, which is where it gets its name. I think I said that it would be off the west coast of South America. So not far from us. Yeah, that's and it would be sort of on route for a butterfly's migration pattern, which is why there's so many butterflies in Mariposa.
That it's really interesting how you answer that question, right? Because you gave us a geography and kind of the shape of what it would be if it was real. And I think another way to read the question is, if you had to pick an existing country, like where does Mariposa represent?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's another, I read the question differently, but I think it's like literally 2 ways to answer it.
Interpret it, right. So for me, Mariposa was, it's kind of a representation of the US. I didn't want to write directly about the US for several reasons. A major reason was that I wanted to make up my own country. I wanted to make up my own place with its own geography. A very important thing that you have to do for yourself when you're a writer is to keep things as enjoyable, as fun as possible. So for me, I was going to have a lot of fun building this world, like creating Mookie's neighborhood, deciding what it looked like, creating this town that he lived in. And I didn't want to be stuck in, the facts of what the US was and what was where and who was who. I wanted some freedom.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, Shanti, we only have a couple minutes left, and I was wondering if we might be able to pivot a bit. And let me know how you feel about this. This is a little bit on the fly. So we had a slide like with the samples, but it takes time to read through it. Yeah. So instead of that, I was wondering if we could just talk this way, and you can kind of explain to us, for our aspiring writers out there, right? We have a lot of amazing readers out there, and for those who aspire to write essays, right, or whatever it is that they want to write. What were some of the differences in writing for adults versus writing for children or young adults?
So I was so used to writing for adults when I started writing for children. That again, I had to keep this process fun and enjoyable for myself. That was my main goal in this. That I let myself write however I was going to write. And what came out at first was a very adult voice. The way I described things, the observations that I had Mookie make. So Mookie's a 12-year-old boy. We're telling the story in his voice. With my first draft, I have to tell you that it sounded like Mookie was speaking with the voice of a 42-year-old woman. It was very strange. He was a 12-year-old boy with like a 42-year-old woman's voice. So I knew that was happening, but I just let myself flow. I let myself have that and just write whatever I wanted to write in my old lady voice. And then for my second draft or third draft, maybe I went through and changed Mookie's voice a little, just tweaked like the words that he would use, the observations that he would make. I had to keep in mind who this character was and what was important to him and what he would really see and what he would consider worthy of description.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like in some ways, right, you have to step into the shoes of this 11-year-old or this young person. Yeah. Right. Because it's not going to be, something that's just we recall. Right. And in so many ways, grown-ups like us, we've walked so far away from our inner child. Right. Like what Panda Dulce was reflecting on, I thought was really powerful, was that drag was a way to return to the inner child. And what we do in our whole life is walk further and further away, right, from that inner child. And it sounds like you're writing, the process of it required a return, at least in part to that child within you.
Yeah, I think I got to return to being a kid. As I was thinking through like the plot and the sort of like adventures and the way that they were going to get themselves out of trouble, I had to go into my kid mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was great. So we are gonna close it up because we're out of time. And in closing, I have the honor of closing tonight. In closing, we like to thank all of our, presenters. Just so moving, and really showed us, the possibilities, that we can find within ourselves if we step into our own identity, and really see our identity as a gift. We want to thank our generous sponsors for tonight's event, and that's Rosa Parks. Woo, Rosa Parks PTA and the Berkeley Arts Magnet PTA, and several BUSD AAPI families. Without them, we couldn't have put on this event. On behalf of the entire BUSD AAPI group, we want to encourage everybody to get involved. We welcome everyone. And to the extent of however you want to be involved in, we're absolutely open to it and can't wait to partner with you. So this email here, jot it down and send us an email, and then let's connect. Please also visit the BUSD Ethnic Studies website. In today's time, we hear a lot about ethnic studies, and I think, sometimes people really aren't sure even, kind of what it is. And we have a beautiful website that explains what ethnic studies is. And it's also a place for you to get updates about its progress within our district. And we're making some amazing, amazing progress. So on behalf of our entire district, happy AAPI Heritage Month, and thank you all for coming. Have a good night.